Good morning, 8th grade. I want to go over a couple things for the week. We will test on Friday. We will do Zoom review on Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. Make sure your book work that I put in Gradebook Wizard is turned in by next Sunday. And then you'll have, again, when you start your test on Friday, you'll actually have the Sunday to turn it in. If you have not got me the test, please do so. If there's an issue, please let me know. Yes, I know there's been several issues of emails not coming through to my inbox. Just follow back up with me. I've had a few of y'all, try again and had some success doing that. Then I can even have some of y'all text me pictures of it if that's what it comes to, if we can't get it through an email. So just let me know if you're having issues with that. I understand, and I know that that's going on, but we want to make sure we get everybody's tests in. All right, moving on. We finished up talking about the Civil War. It ended in our last chapter. Now we're going to start talking about the Reconstruction era and what to do once the war is over. The South in particular faced many problems after the war. There were only two battles, and that was Antietam and Gettysburg, that were fought on northern soil. So all the battles being fought on southern soil, you can imagine there's going to be more damage, more civilians affected too. Resources damage that you need that happened throughout the South. The South laid in ruins, and they lost. All Southerners, really rich or poor, black or white, faced a challenge to rebuild their lives. Quite a large challenge. Reconstruction era is what we're talking about, but the term Reconstruction really refers to the reunification of the country and the rebuilding of the South after the Civil War. And there was a lot of debate and argument that went on regarding Reconstruction. Some of Lincoln's plans that he had thought about really right before the end of the war happened. By then, they knew it was coming. By early 1865, Lincoln and the Union, the North, knew that they were going to win, so they were starting to make plans moving toward what to do, what they were going to do following. And a couple things was under Lincoln's plan that one, they were going to remove government officials of the Confederate States of America, and two, replace them with officials loyal to the Union. And then he had a 10% plan where a southern state could form a new government after 10% of its voters swore an oath of loyalty to the United States. Once formed, the new government had to abolish slavery. All right. So that's what they had to do to get back in the United States. That was his proposal. There was arguments in Congress that this was not harsh enough, especially amongst the Republicans, that that wasn't asking enough, that the percentage of voters to swear loyalty, a lot of people argue, should be at least over half. The plan also offered for amnesty, which is a government pardon, you'll need to know the term, to Confederates who swore loyalty to the Union. Amnesty did not apply to former leaders of the Confederacy. Okay, you'll need to know that. I put that notation. That's in your notes, rather. But once again, many Republicans in Congress felt that Lincoln's plan was really too generous toward the South. A lot of argument goes on over this with the leniency. This is something that comes up really in a lot of wars between the victors and the losers. And how the victors treat the losers. Being overly harsh a lot of times historically only leads to a further war down the road at some point. I think maybe Lincoln understood that. Really, in a lot of ways, I think Grant understood that when he gave Lee, the surrender terms. Some of the things he allowed Lee and his men to keep, he was fairly generous about. But there was a lot of bad blood, at the end, at the war. So there was an argument over that. All right. Lincoln also signed a bill that created the Freedmen's Bureau. This was done 1 month prior to Robert E. Lee surrendering at Appomattox. In the Freedmen's Bureau, it's in there in your notes. What you'll need to know is it provided food and clothing to former slaves and tried to help them find jobs. And the Bureau was used also to help poor whites as well. So you'll need to know that. But as the war ended, just 5 days after Lee's surrender, on April 14th, 1865, you will need to know the date. Lincoln is attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., and he is assassinated. John Wilkes Booth, a popular actor, he was from the South, snuck up behind Lincoln in his box where he was viewing it and shot him in the back of the head. Lincoln would die a few hours later, and Booth would be ultimately caught and killed in a barn outside the city. It's still one of those weird things to talk about, although it was a different time, but it certainly had been a hostile time, how someone could get into the president that easily to do that, but he did, and Lincoln would wind up dying from it. That becomes obviously a major event in terms of Reconstruction. How is it going to be handled? As y'all know, we've talked about in our class before, if something does happen to the president when he's in office, it is the vice president who automatically will take over. And in this case, the vice president was Andrew Johnson, who becomes president. He was a representative from Tennessee who decided, now Tennessee seceded and was a Confederate state, but Johnson stayed in Washington, stayed basically with the Union, and after his home state decided to secede. Johnson, he called for a majority of voters in each southern state, this is something I mentioned earlier, to pledge loyalty to the U.S. and also demanded that each state ratify the 13th Amendment. And what you need to know is the 13th Amendment banned slavery throughout the nation. And the U.S. Congress had approved it in January of 1865. Once again, just a couple months before the end of the war. They could see at that point they were going to win. I mean, it was just, the South could fight a little bit longer, but they weren't, they hadn't really, they were out of resources and men to actually win the war. So the southern states may have ratified the 13th Amendment, and they did, but many passed what they call black codes. And black codes are laws that severely limited the rights of freedmen. And these codes forbade African Americans to vote, to own guns, to serve on juries. So they still want to restrict their freedoms and their right, even though they may not per se been enslaved. But typically these are the things that when you're really trying to oppress somebody historically, you don't want them to be able to have a say in politics. You certainly don't want them armed so they can defend themselves and their rights, or serving on juries, and once again having a say in things, having the say in the law and the politics and all that. It is not uncommon for people, tyrannical governments, they typically disarm their people. The codes did allow blacks to marry legally and own some property, but the codes were meant to keep them from gaining political economic power. That's what you need to know. All right, the Republicans also proposed the 14th Amendment, which granted citizenship to all persons born in the U.S. So it also guaranteed equal protection of the laws and declared that no state could deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. So talking about equal protection of the law is supposed to be applied equally to everyone the same way. And when you're using, no state could deprive any person, they're trying to make it specific that, we're not just talking about this only applies to a certain group. It's all people. So you do need to know about the 14th Amendment as well. All right. In March of 1867, Congress passes the first Reconstruction Act. All right. This required southern states to write new constitutions, required them to ratify the 14th Amendment, and allow African Americans to vote. Okay. This is something This is part of the 14th Amendment. So you'll need to know that in the first Reconstruction Act of 1867. I got that section in your notes. Now, there's going to be other things and measures that some of these states take to continue to discriminate. We're going to talk more about that tomorrow in the next section. So once again, we'll see you then. If you got any questions about the notes or anything of that nature from the book, just save them for our Zoom review on Thursday. See you then.